You're listening to WCOM LP 103.5 FM Carborough and Chapel Hill. It's a Tuesday, it's 5 o'clock, and that only means one thing. It's time for another round of Snarky Faith with your host, Stuart Deloney. This is a space where we irreverently wrestle through life, culture, and spirituality, all with our heads in the clouds, our tongues in our cheeks, our hearts in our sleeves, and our feet on the ground. At Snarky Faith, the questions or even the answers are never the point. It's all about the conversation. So here's your host, Stuart Deloney.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to another round of Snarky Faith Radio. I'm your host, Stuart Deloney. I'm excited to be back here for another week, especially, which I'll get to. I spent part of my weekend in the Lynchburg, Virginia, the belly of the beast, the hometown of Liberty University. It was interesting, to say the least. But before we get to that, we have to get to this, because for all of those out there that have a short attention span that just come here for the Christian crazy, I've got to give you the Christian crazy from this past week and a bit. So some of these things I'm just going to let speak for themselves. So before I say anything else, I give you this.
We talk about, the verse in Timothy where the Apostle Paul said, if a man provide not for his own, especially for those of his own house, he has denied the faith, and you're worse than an infidel. And what he meant by that is even the heathen infidels that do not have a Bible and have never heard of Jesus Christ, they have a written law in their heart given them by God that this is the right thing to do, that this is the duty of men and women who have families and live in communities. This is their responsibility. This is an innate natural law given us by God. That's what Paul meant by that. You don't have to be a Christian. You don't have to read the Bible to know that you have a duty to provide for your family. You cannot provide protection for your family without being equipped to do so. Therefore, you must have the means of self-defense. And in our society today, that means a firearm in the similitude of an AR-15. Without that, you are not in a position, you are not even able to protect not just your family in your house, but your neighbors, your community around you, that we as a community of people, that's the militia, are given the God-given responsibility to protect our communities. That is a biblical requirement. And if we surrender or acquiesce that, we, as Paul said, we have denied the Christian faith, and we are worse than infidels. Now let's let the pastors get up Sunday and preach that sermon. Right. Get up and tell their people, if you are not prepared to defend your family and your neighborhood and your community with the force of arms, you have denied the Christian faith, and you're worse than a heathen.
So, where to begin with that? That is right-wing pastor and radio host Chuck Baldwin really calling out Christians who don't own weapons like an AR-15, saying in very plain terms that our faith is in jeopardy unless we own an AR-15. And then also challenging pastors around America, why aren't you preaching this from your pulpits? Well, I'll give you just a little hint why no one's going to preach this from the pulpit on a Sunday morning, Chuck. Because it's nuts, because it's crazy, because it's unbiblical, because Jesus, like that. I feel like that should be the answer for anything in a statement like this. Why is this wrong? Because Jesus, because of nonviolent Jesus, because of what the hell are you talking about? Or what are you smoking? I'm not really sure. But I do believe the further that we've gone down this road, down the tracks on the Trump train, evangelical America continues to get more and more crazy. Like, I feel like the crazy is ramping up. It's like it's multiplying. It's expounding itself. This is fascinating. And we here at Snarky Faith are totally fine with that because it's really fun to point this out and to be snarky and laugh at it. Think that's the worst? Oh, there's more, my dear Snark Nation. I've totally got more for you with this.
It's not that Donald Trump is all that perfect of a guy. We all know he's not. And we know that he's not necessarily perfect in every way that we would like. That's not how God works. He works through the ones he chooses.
Right.
We don't choose them.
No.
All we have to do is recognize them.
Yeah.
And when you recognize a chosen one, and you have the discernment to know that they've been chosen and know that that's the will of God, then your life will be blessed.
Yes.
And if you come against the chosen one of God, okay?
Okay, so real quick here. So this is Mary Colbert. I'm not even going to say the word Colbert attached to her name. I'm going to call her Mary Colbert. And thus shall she be named Mary Colbert. So Mary Colbert's calling the rest of us morons out because we just can't see that Trump is the chosen one. It's obvious for those who can see. You need to just be one of the chosen that can see. You know, those that wear like Joseph Smith, like glasses that only he can see, special tablets. Yes, thanks, Mormonism. And though this has nothing to do with Mormonism, but I'm just trying to like wrap my head around this idea that somehow like there's only certain ones that can see the specialness of Donald Trump. Maybe those are the ones that get non-disclosure agreements and payoffs. I don't really know how this works, and I'm so sorry, Mary Colbert. I will let you finish because you were about to talk about what's going to happen to the rest of us that don't see Trump's glory because he's the chosen one from God.
Okay? You are bringing upon you and your children and your children's children curses like you have never seen.
That's right.
It puts a holy fear in me.
Yeah.
You know, and
they're picking the flaws out of this man that God has chosen.
Right. And you don't look for a perfect person. You look for the one God's chosen.
You don't look for a perfect person. You look for the one that God has chosen. What? I'm sorry there, Mayor Bear. I'm not really sure what you're trying to say here. A pox on my children and anyone whose children and grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren and beyond this. So I'm sorry, guys. Listening to the show, you apparently are cursed for generations to come because we're not seeing God's chosen one. But even though good old Mary Colbert was speaking on the Jim Bakker Show, we can't be complete unless we listen to Jimbo himself. So, Jim, let me go ahead and give you the mic.
Why do the nations rage and the people plot in vain? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord. Hear this. This is where we are.
It is. It's that season.
America is in a war against God. People won't hear this. They're not listening. You turn on TV and you say, what is going on? What? Our president it's like he's in a war. He's not running the country like he should because he's trying to defend himself.
That's right.
You don't kid yourself. He's in warfare.
Sorry, Jim. I just got to pause you there. Because we did an episode a few weeks back here on Snarky Faith about how the church gaslights people, how the church manipulates people into thinking that they are seeing the world in a wrong way. And this is a great example of it. Oh my goodness. Because really, if you're trying to manipulate people, one of the greatest ways to do it is to use scripture out of context. And also, secondly, use ridiculous dramatic pauses. Like, I'm doing right now. But we haven't even gotten to the good stuff yet. So, Jim, go ahead and continue.
God spoke to me today on this broadcast. What you are experiencing in this nation through the televisions, through all the networking and through Hollywood, through everything now, everything. You're feeling a spirit, which is the spirit of Antichrist.
Say it. Yes.
There is a war in the world against God. You say, why would our God give us a president who swears? Why would he give us a president who's had affairs with women throughout his lifetime?
Footnote, are you just kind of describing yourself, Jim? A man who's had affairs throughout his lifetime, embezzled money, went to jail for felony? What? Anything? I'm sorry. Continue.
The people of Israel could cry out, why did God give us David?
Actually, one of my favorite things that I tend to listen to, because I guess I've learned to tune out Jim Bakker. I love like his little minions that sit around him when he says stuff and they're like, oh yeah, yeah, right on, oh yeah. I mean, it's kind of like a dirty version of the Kool-Aid Man. No, let's make this even worse. It kind of just sounds like these weird little porno sounds that they've thrown in here to make Jim Bakker sound more interesting. So, to prove my point, I'm going to let you continue to listen to the rest of Jim Bakker talking about the fact that America is warring against Trump and it's somehow against God, but I'm going to set it to a little bit of music.
The people of Israel could cry out, why did God give us David? Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. David, even after all he did, the affairs he had, all the women he had, if there was ever a womanizer, it was King David. All right, guys, let's just get it straight. How many presidents have had affairs?
All of them.
I don't know if anybody wrote a book about that or not.
I have to defer to the Harvard guy.
Yeah.
I have no idea. Harvard.
No, no, don't go, don't scatter.
Stay with it.
Stay with it.
One of the most loved presidents of all times, from the information that I have firsthand, had multiple affairs daily in the White House. You say, how could he know? Well, somebody had to bring the women up the stairs. If we destroy our president because of his sin, we're going to have to go back and wipe out the presidencies of history. Multiple.
Oh, yeah. Gonna go take a shower after that one, Jim. Yeah. That's right. Sorry, I don't think I can make any more grunt noises after that. I went from humor to feeling dirty right now. But the justification from him is that, well, if other presidents have had affairs or been corrupt, well, what can we do? That's kind of like saying other people have murdered or committed genocide. So, yeah, who of us haven't done that? Because, oh my gosh, Jim, what are you even talking about? And I want to read this to you. So just, everyone here knows I am a big supporter of Jim Bakker. You know that from being around this show. Come on. I'm in No, I'm really not at all. My sarcasm is running thin at this moment, but I decided to do this. So I was trying to figure out, like, what is his audience? What are his ratings? And again, they don't publish this for probably good reason. But what I did stumble upon, and this is kind of a bit of, it's gold. The Better Business Bureau's complaints against the Jim Bakker Show, and they're just funny. They're just amusing. And I've mentioned this before, and so Jim makes a lot of his money off of these doomsday buckets. These things that he, again, spreads these yarns that the end of the world is near, Jesus is coming back, but in the meantime, you need to make sure that you are stocked up, and we, the Jim Bakker Show, have you totally covered with doomsday food. Because what doesn't sound delicious about doomsday food? Honey, can you pass some of the doomsday steak? Oh, yes. I'll pass some of the doomsday mashed potatoes as well. Yes, it just sounds delicious. I haven't been able to get my finances in order yet to take the plunge, but boy has dreams. Someday. So here's a few of the complaints that they had on the Better Business Bureau website. Better Business Bureau website, which almost reads like some of those crazy Amazon reviews that I also love to read. So here's the first one. And these would be funny enough if these are trolls. And actually some of this, like, there's like a sad story in the middle of my mocking in this because people have invested real money in these. But here is review number 1 from Swazette Witten. And she writes, buyer beware. Do not buy food from the Jim Bakker Show. I paid $900 for the products and $300 for shipping and handling. I wanted to say, Swazette, your first mistake was paying for $300 shipping and handling. I ordered my product in August of 2017 and was promised a 6 to 8 delivery window. I'm pretty sure this ain't Amazon Prime. An order came in mid-October, and it had another person's name on it in the packaging slip, along with missing and damaged items with no labels. I called and spoke to Audrey, a supervisor who wanted me to settle without the missing items, and proceeded to tell me that they wanted to send me a deluxe pantry bucket. Because who doesn't want food in buckets? Delicious. As she said, they had sold out. She wanted to give her a deluxe pantry bucket, but they had sold out. Their hands were tied. And she continues. She said that I can keep the items without labels. Really? That's what Swazette says. Who wants damaged items and items without labels? At any rate, I proceeded to call some place here, Augustine Farms, for my order and contacted, several other people's names. Well, I received, eventually, this is good. There's some resolution here. I know you guys were going to be upset if you didn't hear resolution. I received new items, and I was sent again a bucket without a label. People are total frauds. They send buckets without labels. I spent so much money to receive the food without labels. This is unprofessional. This is all in caps. I will be contacting the Better Business Bureau and the Food and Drug Administration regarding this, which is also kind of funny that she's actually contacting them by writing this review. I will also be contacting the news media regarding this as well. Do not put yourself through the hassle and order food because you do not know what you are going to get. So seriously, people, Jim Bakker, amongst all the other things he's been convicted of in the past, does not label his food buckets. Buyer beware. And we'll read you one more from David M. Approximately 4 years ago, I purchased a large quantity, parentheses, the 7-year time of trouble. Sounds delicious. Of the 20-year survival food, parentheses, food for life. Upon receiving it, I saw the finer print on the pouches that said life is 20 years if stored at 60 degrees Fahrenheit and 10 years at 70 degrees, my typical temperature. We like most other retail customers, do not have a 60-degree storage area. I will consider this deceitful advertising because we bought 7 years worth and we had to begin eating it now. And the okay, pause. This will be me. And the tribulation hasn't even begun now. I'm eating my tribulation rations now, and I'm not enjoying it. I'm not enjoying judgment and watching those that sin burn in hell. I was hoping it'd be like a popcorn thing. Okay, sorry. Back to his review. We discovered 2 of the pouch types, the cheesy broccoli rice and the creamy vegetable rice, have spices that 5 of 6 of us can hardly stomach, meaning we are almost getting sick. The folks on the show had advertised how good it tasted. That may be subjective, but the bottom line is I got rid of most of those pouches. And I'm not enjoying the apocalypse. That was my part. I made no attempt to ask for compensation because it is a ministry which reportedly is always short on finances. Plus, it has been several years since the purchase. I take responsibility for naively having believed the claims without testing a small amount first. Some other products I've ordered since then have been acceptable. Oh my God, David, really? You had all these grievances and you continued to buy your end times storage buckets and continue to eat them out of spite. I paid for it, we're going to eat it, but the spices, they don't agree with my digestion. My wife has had irritable bowel syndrome for 40 days and 40 nights, all because of Jim Bakker. But I don't want to speak ill of the man because his ministry's always having financial problems. I don't even know how that can happen because he's so good with his finances. Oh, Jim, you are the gift that keeps on giving. In the fact that you keep ripping people off and we can keep making fun of you. So thank you so much. So all of that we've talked about so far really doesn't, well, no. I'm going to pause myself on this one. I'm going to use all of that to transition to this. The Nation posted an article just recently called Why Evangelicals Still Support Trump by Katha Pollitt. And I love the subheading that she has in the article. So snarky. If you leave out, she said, why evangelicals still support Trump. If you leave out the part about him being corrupt, immoral con man, and a bully, there's lots to like about him. Oh, Miss Pollitt, this is great. It's good stuff because we here at the show continue to support Donald Trump and the fact that we support him because he gives us fodder to laugh at and mock and make fun of. And also gives us so much material to continue to poke at the evangelical church. No, I'd mentioned this earlier. Speaking of the evangelical church, and I will hop into her article there, but it made me think of how I spent my last weekend. I went up to kind of support a friend that was presenting at the Lynchburg Revival. The Lynchburg Revival in Lynchburg, Virginia, which is headquarters to Liberty University. And it was put on by the Red Letter Christian, Shane Claiborne, and his bunch up there. And so I was up there on Saturday, took my son up, went to go hang out with my good buddy, Chris Maloney, who did the film In God We Trump. He was presenting. And what I want to say is just 2 things. One, I got to be able to listen to Shane Claiborne talk, and Shane is always a lively, passionate dude that I have mass respect for. And so the session I was listening to him about was talking about gun reform and what Shane has been personally doing with his organization, A Simple Way, to be able to combat that. And he told just beautiful, heartbreaking stories of people's lives that have been shattered by issues with guns and was making pleas for that. But the thing that was really more interesting is that Shane had actually reached out to Jerry Falwell Jr. asking him, actually wholeheartedly, because if anyone has ever heard Shane speak, Shane is very genuine. He's not snarky. Shane is actually genuine in when he does this, and he believes in the power of prayer. He believes very, very deeply in the ways of Jesus, and he has been trying to reach out to Jerry Falwell Jr., just saying, hey, bud, simply, I want to actually be able to sit down with and just pray with you. Just pray with you. No agenda. I just really want to pray with you. And on top of it, he'd been contacted by different students and alumni at Liberty University that wanted just to kind of have a time of prayer at Liberty. Not a protest, but prayer. And the funny thing was, he was met with, which we got to hear over the weekend, he was met with a cease and desist order from Liberty University, essentially saying that if you step foot on campus, you can be fined up to $2,500 and also put in jail for a month. Nothing says the love of Christ like a cease and desist restraining order-esque type of thing. Oh, Jerry, he's just playing hard to get. And I will tell you, in my time up there and hanging out with a bunch of just amazing folks, but then also being around Liberty and kind of, I wouldn't say touring it, but really seeing the finer points of Liberty. And I'm not a person who's overly spiritual in the realm of like, there's demons and spirits everywhere, but I will tell you, it was just weird. And maybe you can chalk it up to my self-perception, but man, it had a weird feel to that whole campus. It did, in that whole town. So I'm not saying Lynchburg is haunted, but I'm saying there's something kind of funk in the water there. But back to our article. Sorry for that aside, but I had to get that little bit out. So back to the article where Pollitt just is asserting this, and I thought some of this was interesting. She said, according to Pew, in December, Trump's approval rating amongst white evangelicals was 61%, which is down from 78% the previous February, but still twice or almost twice the figure for voters overall. They're the only religious demographic where Trump has anything like majority support. And she goes on to being able to talk about Trump, saying, if you leave out the part where Trump being corrupt and a moral con man and a bully who might as well plunge us into World War III, which for some evangelicals wouldn't be so bad given the sinfulness of humanity, there's lots to like. Being snarky here for her. He's putting their guys on the federal bench. Just one more Supreme Court justice, and And there go abortions, civil rights, gay rights, separation of church and state, and much more. He's installed agency heads who are right-wing Christians: Betsy DeVos, Ben Carson, Jeff Sessions, Scott Pruitt, Nikki Haley, and if he's confirmed, Mike Pompeo, who plus virtually anyone in his administration who has anything to do with women's health. He's promised to get rid of the Johnson Amendment, which bars tax-exempt religious institutions from endorsing candidates, paving the way for a mammoth tide of political contributions to churches. White evangelicals distrust science, distrust racial discrimination, believe that immigrants threaten American values, and worry about extremism amongst American Muslims. His base does, so does Trump. And best of all, Trump is the one New Yorker who has never made them feel the least bit culturally inferior. After all, they, his base, are virtuous, and he is not. So connecting this article to the Jim Bakker show that we were kind of skewering earlier, I think that's an interesting point. I think that's an interesting point that, especially with the Jim Bakker show, saying that like Trump is God's chosen one for America, and irregardless of how horrible he is or anything else you could say about him, he's God's chosen, so he gets a pass. And then in this article from The Nation, being able to say that Trump's base sees that they're virtuous, even though he is not. So in a weird way, it's kind of like one of those things, well, he's God's chosen, I'm not that bad, so let's just go to church, y'all. Yes, my brain continues to explode. And being able to talk about the base and how we got here. I'm going to tell you a little story, then I'm going to hop into a report that they had from the Barna Institute. And this is something that surprised me. This is a couple years back. I was teaching a class in missional living. And after hearing all that porno music, I'm not talking about missional in that way. No, talking about missional in the context of how to live out the mission of Christ in ways that all Christians are called to do. And I remember I'm teaching this class, and I'm beginning to talk to people about that, that being a Christian isn't about going to church. It's about going out and serving people in the community, about serving your neighbor, about, loving those that aren't like you, about being able to have eyes to look at the community, to see where there are the hurting and the needy and the marginalized in society, and going there and being Jesus to them. And I was teaching this class, and this wasn't like to people that were new Christians. Most of the people in the class had been in church for most of their lives. And as I'm saying this stuff, someone actually stops me, and they're like, I have a question. And I was like, yes. He's like, why have we never heard this? And I was like, I don't know. What do you mean? He's like, no, I've been going this guy, and I loved it. I loved his honesty, and I'm not mocking him at all. I really appreciate him having a moment of transparency. And he said, I've been going to church my whole life, and I've never heard this. I've always thought that being a Christian was going to church, serving the church, and that was mainly it. And when he said that to me, I was like, I didn't know what to say. And then I looked as I'm kind of, again, my mind moves pretty fast. So when I feel like I'm befuddled, it may feel like 5 minutes, but it's probably like 5 seconds. But as I'm watching this, it's almost like in slow motion. And I see all the other adults just kind of nodding their head like, yeah. And I was like, what do you mean you guys don't know that this is part of what you're supposed to do and be as a Christian? And they're like, well, we thought going to church, kind of going to Bible studies, raising our kids right, tithing to the church, and generally being good human beings was really what God wanted from us. And I was like, wait, huh? How have you missed this? How have you missed this central part of Christianity? This idea that we are called to kind of be the hands and feet of Christ and move out into the communities to do that, even if it costs of ourselves. And they didn't get it. I mean, they eventually got it. But for these folks, and again, these aren't like, I'm not saying these were like teenagers. If I'm going to say like the median age for that group that was there was probably 50. And for me, people that have been going to church most of their lives that are somehow not understanding this is a bit alarming. Now, I'm not blaming them for this. I'm also blaming just the model of Christianity that the church projects, and whether it's through words or through actions, kind of pushes out onto people. And it was shocking, because I will be honest to you, this wasn't a small church, and many of the people that were in there were in leadership positions in the church. And I'm not saying like chief volunteer. No, I'm talking about like in positions of authority in this church. And this was somehow, it was shocking to them. Now, what I love for them was that when they heard this was kind of like a bit of like, it was a bit of kind of like being able to drink water after you were thirsty. And they were like, tell me more. Like how can this work for me? How can we actually do this? And so that part of it was encouraging. But as I'm like driving home afterwards, and just so many things going through my mind, going like, what have we been doing as the church in America? And I will tell you this, I've spoken to other people and other leaders after this instance happened, and I would kind of be like, how does this gel with you? Like, do you think that like people in your congregation say that? And a lot of people were like, yeah, actually, yeah. And one thing that I want to point out too. So this is an article called, it's kind of on the nose. Is that 51% of churchgoers do not know of the Great Commission. Okay, so first and foremost, let me go ahead and read to you the Great Commission. And it's found in Matthew 28, 18 through 20. And Jesus came to them and said, and he's talking to the disciples here, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I've commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. Very simple, but a very formative bit of scripture there. So essentially, Jesus was saying, all that I've taught you, all that you have seen, all that you have been part of, you have seen the impact I have made here. You have seen the teachings I have done. You have seen me by my actions. So go and teach others to do this. Now, in many ways, I grew up Baptist, and the church I was teaching people in was not Baptist. And the Baptists have kind of weaponized the Great Commission to go and make disciples of all nations, going into areas and helping save the heathens. And it's not so simple as that. It's not so simple as just going and saying, do you love Jesus? Check yes or no. No, but what it is, it's going to make disciples. And the idea of discipleship is this idea of kind of living in community with people, living in the ways that Jesus lived, speaking in the ways that Jesus lived, interacting with people that believe like you and don't believe like you in the ways that Jesus did. And then Jesus also tells you that he will be with you in the midst of this. And it to me, I read a lot of beauty into the depth of this, meaning that we are called to be Christ to others. And we are called to live in community with people that may believe like us and may not believe like us. But we are still called to live out that ethic of Jesus. And we're called to invite them into something greater that they understand. And I'm not even simply just talking about this. And this is where also the Baptists and many others have gone wrong. They've read this, that this is simply about conversion, turn or burn kind of theology, that you go and tell them, Jesus died for you, rose again, so you don't go to hell, boy. Do you accept this on your life? No. And see, because one of the key things that is in this is go and make disciples. It's not about going and making converts. It's going and making disciples. And in my life, the people that I've kind of walked with, and I would say that I have discipled, have also kind of discipled me in the process. It's kind of it's a process of being able to walk with people and have God teach you through them, and you teach them through God. It's not about having any kind of superiority or having any kind of authority over them in many ways, because Jesus says this, I've given you authority, but the authority is in Jesus and how we're talking about this. And it's a way of us going and living like servants in the places that we have been put, to go out and talk about the teachings of Jesus, talk about how this stuff has changed us, talk about how following Jesus has made a difference in our lives, and that we love it so much that we can't go back to the way that we used to live before. We kind of were confronted with this new way of living and loving others. And so giving you that bit of context, this is where it gets interesting. So Barna had gone out and found through their polling that only about half, 51% of churchgoers said that they actually knew what even the term the Great Commission meant. So, first of all, the idea of the Great Commission, this thing that that we as Christians are supposed to go out and reach out to others. And they say this in the article. It would be reassuring to assume that the half who know the term are also familiar with the passage by its name. But that proportion is actually low. So some people had heard the term, but didn't really even understand what it meant at all, which is kind of scary. So in their breakdown, they'd had this, like the churchgoers, these are regular church attenders. Have you ever heard of the Great Commission? 51% said no. 6% said I'm not sure. 17% said yes, and it means this, blah, blah, blah. And then 25% said yes, but I can't recall the exact meaning behind it, which is a little interesting. Meaning that this, and you have heard me say this before, is that the American church, by and large, is doing its followers a disservice, whereas they can feel comfortable saying that they're Christians, they can feel comfortable saying they're going to church, but they have no idea what it means to follow Jesus. I talked about this in like a show or so ago, where I'd worked for an evangelistic organization where I began to question their methods and modality for what they were doing and saying like, oh, we're making converts for Jesus. And I was saying, well, what are you actually offering them? What kind of kingdom of God are you offering them into? And they're like, that's kind of not the point. I'm paraphrasing. But essentially, that's not the point. We just need to save them so they don't go to hell. And that mentality of save them so they don't go to hell has actually really nothing to do with the Great Commission. Now, if there are the conservative and fundamentalists, they're going to roast me for saying that. But really think about this, conservatives and fundamentalists. If you're not actually like inviting them into anything more, like if you're not like discipling and walking with them and doing life with them and walking out like the teachings and commands of Jesus, then you're simply you're boiling everything down to like what Barna was doing, almost like a polling question. Do you believe in Jesus? Check, check. Without Jesus, will you live for the rest of eternity in eternal damnation? Check, check. I mean, we've ended up making it into this kind of like intellectual pursuit, not something that is a lot deeper than that. And what I mean by that is that in order to kind of walk out the gospel of Jesus, it's not something you understand completely on paper. Like, it kind of gives you a rough idea, but really to walk out the ways of Jesus, it's a very experiential road that you go down. It's something that changes you, and your understanding kind of morphs and changes and grows as you continue to follow after this wild Jesus. Because if you want to think about it, the way that we have very nice and neat theology, very nice and neat churches where we can kind of go into, here's some good words, sing some songs, and then leave and go home, it doesn't really affect or screw up our lives. And I will tell you, following after Jesus has kind of wrecked a lot of my life. And I would do it all again anytime you ask me. Because it's simply that. It's not just a set of dogma to believe in. It's not simply a set of ideals to ascribe to or just say, yes, I can check the box on X, Y, and Z. That makes me a Christian. Really, following after Jesus has to do with living out these ethics of Jesus in a messy world that we find ourselves in a world where a lot of Christians say they support Trump, and it makes no sense to you, saying Jesus is here, but a lot of the Christians are over here on the other side supporting this guy that really kind of seems horrible. It can be confusing. But that's the difference between following after Jesus and following after the institution that tells you what to think. Tracking with me? Maybe. If not, send me questions or hate mail, questions@starkeyfaith.com. But what I wanted to get to this last bit, which I have, and I'll tell you this, in many ways, I love being confrontational, but also in many ways, I have this bit, and it may not come out on the show, but if anybody knows me, I am a compassionate human being. And I'm actually pretty decent at debating, though I don't like to, because I actually feel like the art of debate is very fruitless. Now, I would counter that by saying, but I feel like the art of dialogue is very enriching. And I do have my favorite internet trolls that come from the conservative persuasion that like to try to go after me. And most recently in several things that they were trying to do this. And also conservative trolls, if you're listening right now, especially the ones that probably know who I'm talking about, I will totally dialogue with you until it's not dialoguing anymore. Because I remember a little while back that John Oliver had done this, and just look it up. He did this report on whataboutism, like what about? And so what will happen is in the course of what I am assuming is dialogue at the beginning, they'll ask a question, like trying to nail me to the wall because they're going to show that I'm an idiot. I'll answer the question, and they don't really have a rebuttal to me, but then they'll say, well, what about this? 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 And so it ends up just being this like random, like just sprawling of rabbit trails. And what begins to sink on into me very quickly is that they really don't want an answer. They're not really looking to understand. They're not really looking to grow. They're really just wanting to continue to be right. And in many cases, if I feel like people are honestly being truthful and genuine in their conversations and stuff, I'm willing to concede certain things in conversations and dialogues. Like, I actually like it. I mean, there's a reason that I run discussion groups in the area that I live in that has people from all walks of life and different faiths that kind of come to talk and to dialogue around spiritual issues. So I kind of like it. And if I didn't, I'm pretty sure a bunch of people wouldn't feel welcome to do that. So, that being said, one thing that they were trying to pin me and some of my friends, which again, I love my friends, especially that's the one good thing I've noticed recently about social media. And my wife has helped me walk through this, is that oftentimes these folks will kind of happen. It'll be like almost like when I'm about to go to sleep. They start kind of ramping up their things, and I'll say a few things, and she'll just be like, just wait. Just wait till tomorrow. And with me, like, I'm like, there's so many zingers in my head. I want to do it, but it's not compassionate. I shouldn't say that. So I pull back, and I try to be just honest and genuine in my relationship with them. But at some point, I got to go to bed. And what I've noticed, and it's beautiful, is that I go to bed and a bunch of other people from weird, crazy, different backgrounds in my life kind of hop in and jump all over these people. And these are people that don't even know each other. They're people that are either connected like to me in various ways from across the country or across the world. And it's kind of been beautiful to see this. Folks that don't even know each other being able to kind of speak truth into these realms of conservative craziness that's trying to attack me and tear me down. Which I'm totally fine with you guys tearing me down. Just realize at some point, once it becomes fruitless, I just stop responding. So that brings us to this last question. And the reason I even bring this up, I found this in Reuters, and one of my, I kind of have a Tweedledee and Tweedledum of trolls that was recently kind of like tag teaming. And the thing that he kept coming back to is, well, what do we call what you are? Because they get mad that I call out evangelicals. And so I'm trying to think through this. I'm going like, what do you mean? Like, well, it was somehow like they couldn't attack like where I'm standing at because they didn't have a system to label and to tear this down. And I'm still not going to give them this, but which is also funny, like a day or so later, after I'm going through this, I did find this article in Reuters that says the, quote, religious left is emerging as a political force in the Trump era. I don't know if I'm comfortable ever really with labels, because labels are boxes, and once you're in a box, you really have to like be able to have four walls and a top and a bottom, and I feel like that's really un-Jesus-y and actually just really un-normal to life, because we evolve and change and we grow and we learn and all these other kind of beautiful things. But that brought me to this point, was being able to talk a bit through what is this? What is this? And again, I may be left-leaning in many things. I also am like slightly cautious about this idea of the religious left moving in the way that they're moving, because all the trappings that led to the rise of the religious right the traps are still there set for you for the religious left. But I'm not going to dialogue too much into that right now. I'm just going to give you some just raw data from this article. And the article begins with this. Since President Donald Trump's election, monthly lectures on social justice at the 600-seat Gothic chapel in New York's Union Theological Seminary has been filled to capacity with crowds 3 times that they usually draw. In January, the 181-year Upper Manhattan Graduate School, whose architecture evokes London's Westminster Abbey, turned away 1,000 people from a lecture on mass incarceration. In the 9 years that Reverend Serene Jones has served as president, she has never seen such crowds. And she said this: the election of Donald Trump has been a clarion call to progressives in the Protestant and Catholic churches in America to move out of a place of primarily professing progressive policies into really taking action. And this is what I find very interesting right now. And this is why, at the same time, I'm going to praise this movement right now, but I'm also cautious of movements and labels, because in the past, they come and go. And just like denominations, oftentimes when you start a movement, it's about this one moment in the sand, and you don't ever tread too far from that. But let's just continue with this article. So this article talks about this group that's traditionally seen as lacking clout has been propelled into political activism by Trump's policies on immigration, healthcare, and social welfare, according to clergy members, activists, and academics. And a key test will be how well they will be able to translate its mobilization into votes into the 2018 midterm congressional elections. article goes on to say it's one of the dirty little secrets of American politics that there has been a religious left all along, and it just hasn't done a good job of organizing, says Patrick Hornbeck, the second chairman of theology department at Fordham University, a Jesuit school in New York. And what is exciting to see this is that people are seeing this crisis that is going on, seeing this crisis in a way, a crisis of faith. Now, I'm not saying we're an American, we are a Christian, America's a Christian nation. I'm not going down that rabbit hole. But what I am saying is that people of faith are beginning to see these things. They're beginning to see a crisis of the gospel. They're seeing a crisis of everything that has to do with Jesus. And they're letting their beliefs, their core beliefs in who Jesus is and taught them to be, and they're taking up action against it. They're not doing it for power. They are doing it for change. And I feel like that is a huge difference between the rise and formation of the religious right. That was ultimately about making change, but it was also about grabbing power. And the article says the religious progressive activism has been part of American history. Religious leaders and their followers played key roles in campaigns to abolish slavery, promote civil rights, and the end of the Vietnam War, amongst others. And this later upwelling of left-leaning religious activism has accompanied the dawn of the Trump presidency. And this is, if we can see anything good that has come of this, is that I feel like Trump is uniting intelligent people that think for themselves, that can look at the world around us and say, this is messed up. This is screwed up. And these are people that are religious and non-religious, but begin to see this idea, which I would even say is kind of a Jesus idea, that people are being squashed. People are being marginalized. People are being hurt. People are being killed, and people are being treated like garbage. And this ain't right. And it's an exciting time to see the rise of that. It is an exciting time to see the rise of kind of Jesus-y ethics in moving forward in this. And I understand I'm making blatant statements, and I understand very well that I have 2 minutes left in this show, and you can poke holes in this. But ultimately, I see this activism, people being engaged in politics like we haven't been in a long period of time. We're not just listening to our leaders. We're actually taking action on our own. We are marching. We are pushing for legislation. We have people that would have never run for office running for office right now, and it is very exciting. And I'm excited to see where this is going. We are seeing like interfaith groups coming together, whether it be the churches, the synagogues, and others coming together and saying, this is not an ethic of God and this is wrong. And it's kind of beautiful as we're seeing this move forward. And I think that hopefully this ends in something positive, like positive and lasting, because again, we've talked about this on the show before, but like in America, in many ways, politics has turned into something that it's just all about who's winning. Like, what is the score? And the problem with that, when we're treating the politics in that way, is that people get screwed over all the time. And people really don't matter. It's just about your team winning and the other team losing. And as we begin to mobilize and look forward towards November, I want to see something that would be lasting, but also very human, and something that actually gives dignity to people, especially groups that are marginalized in our culture today, like the LGBTQ community, like the immigrant community, like hell, the African American community that has really always been marginalized and has never been unmarginalized, even though we say that we're in 2018, right? We're so far beyond the civil rights movement. Everything's been fixed, right? No, it hasn't. People are still living under the thumb of capitalism and our rising oligarchy that we live under. And things just aren't right. The playing field is not level and needs to be leveled. Common decency needs to reign in our country. And we need to be a people that care about all people. Because that also is a very Jesus-y thing. I'm going to end on that note. So as we end this broadcast, just a reminder that you can catch us on podcast at www.snarkyfaith.com. And I want to tell you, too, if you love what we're saying, hey, reach out to us. questions@snarkyfaith.com. If you hate what we're saying, I don't mind engaging in dialogue with people that hate what I'm doing here, too. Or if you have ideas for topics, or if you're even interested in being on the show. I've brought people on before, and I love to be able to have multiple and varied voices here on the show because I think we can all learn from each other. Because as musician Ben Lee, who was on our show many moons ago, wrote in one of his songs, "We are all in this together. We're on an earth. We're all stuck here with each other, whether we like it or not. Some days it's like trying to corral my kids into telling them to be civil. But guess what? We've got one earth. We're all people. And if you're religious, you believe we're all made in the image of God. So stop being a-holes to each other. And hopefully we can move towards a constructive place where we can be more loving and compassionate and graceful to one another. And we can be able to live, whether we say so or not, in the ways of Jesus. So I send you off with grace and peace and snark. I'm out of here.
WCOM is listener-supported community radio, and Snarky Faith is only possible through our sponsors. Lumen, a spiritual community of seekers, sojourners, question askers, doubters, and skeptics, is a collective of fellow travelers that embrace the truth that all of life is sacred, hope is real, and tomorrow can be a better day than today. All are welcome. You can find more information at www.lumencommunities.com.